They say that Hollywood is a bulk business, and 2023 is not shaping up to be an exception. We're only halfway through the year, and there are already some truly awful movies out there. These are the worst of the worst. The world is still trying to make sense of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the purposes of art is to unpack the emotions, lessons, and impact of shared human experiences like this. It's unsurprising, then, that a curious subgenre of pandemic movies has developed in recent years. By and large, these somber, anxious, and surreal movies have been met with savage critical assessments. Perhaps not enough time has passed to gain an interesting artistic perspective, or maybe nobody wants to relive the most painful days of 2020. Either way, movies like Lockdown and The Bubble were not well received, and in 2023, Life Upside Down joined them. Life Upside Down consists of intertwining stories about a few hard-to-root-for Los Angeles couples. Art gallery owner Jonathan is stuck quarantining with his wife, but he misses his mistress Clarissa, who lives solo and interacts with the world at a distance. Sheltering at home makes everyone sad, mad, and upset, feelings that audiences will certainly remember experiencing themselves not that long ago. This did not land well. Nell Minow of RogerEbert.com had this to say: "The characters are shallow and tiresomely needy, not to make any point or learn any lessons, just due to a lack of imagination." Minow was far from alone in this opinion. Critics absolutely lambasted the film. Released in 1990, the original House Party is a modern comedy classic. The lighthearted, likable, and low-key ensemble film starred then-popular rap duo Kid and Play as a couple of high school friends who pull off an epic rager despite numerous setbacks that threaten to derail things at every turn. It spawned a couple of okay sequels, and in 2023, a remake. The new film ups the stakes, the wacky comedy, and the celebrity branding, which results in an incongruous jumble. This time, the partiers are adults, best friends, and failed promoters Damon and Kevin. About to lose their low-paying jobs as house cleaners and on the verge of financial ruin, they decide to throw a shindig in the last house they're scheduled to clean, a mansion belonging to NBA superstar LeBron James. The rest of the movie consists of material celebrating and lightly teasing James, drug-fueled party hijinks, and rapper cameos. Critics didn't outright loathe the new House Party across the board, but they were largely unimpressed and confused as to why it needed to exist. As Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times put it, the bash at LeBron James's mansion ends up feeling more exhausting than exciting. Brian Richards of Pajiba agreed, writing, "This version wasn't as funny or as good as it could have and should have been, and it doesn't even have the same level of parts as the original." Reinventing the romantic comedy is a noble and ambitious effort. Attempting to explore a love story through the lens of modern technology is even more enticing. Millions of people spend their whole lives on sophisticated smartphones, but it's hard to make staring at screens smiling particularly romantic. That's the trouble with Your Place or Mine, a Netflix original starring the usually charming Reese Witherspoon and Ashton Kutcher, both of whom have extensive rom-com experience. Their characters, Debbie and Peter, had a fling 20 years ago. They're now best friends who live on opposite coasts. After they get a taste of each other's lives by switching houses, she goes to Los Angeles, he regroups in New York, they wind up falling in love. Almost the entirety of their relationship unfolds via phone calls. Your Place or Mine couldn't quite overcome its own restrictions, earning a critical shellacking. Rex Reed of The Observer wrote, "About as romantic and funny as a root canal."
Is it safe?
Others agreed, calling the movie a flat exercise in rom-com tropes cutting-edge technology can't save. In 1978, horror master Stephen King published the short story Children of the Corn in the anthology Night Shift. Before long, Hollywood adapted the creepy tale of a tiny Midwestern farm town populated entirely by sacrifice-obsessed children. After making the first Children of the Corn movie in 1984, the filmmakers never stopped. The latest Children of the Corn is the 11th entry in the franchise. This time, the story unfolds a little differently. The terrifying cult leader is a 12-year-old girl instead of a boy, and it's a plucky high school student who dares to stand up to her in her army of adult-killing kids. This latest take on the story has additionally differentiated itself by earning truly execrable reviews. Richard Whitaker of the Austin Chronicle said, "It's all so ridiculous and implausible." Sarah Michelle Fetters of Movie Freak concurred, writing, "The only emotional response this Children of the Corn scares up is boredom." A daringly sinister slaughter of a sacred cow, Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey boasts a simple premise. It's a horror version of A.A. Milne's classic stories of the 100-Acre Wood, famously populated by Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, Eeyore, and their human friend Christopher Robin. The work entered the public domain in 2022, so it's fair game for interpretation. Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey doesn't do much to analyze or satirize its well-known source material, however. The movie is a by-the-numbers slasher dressed in Pooh's clothing, and that novelty wears off quickly. The plot involves little more than murderous incarnations of Pooh and Piglet attacking Christopher Robin and several young women staying in a nearby cabin. Kyle Turner of the New York Times laments, "It's not funny enough to have anything clever to say about its gag, and it's not exciting enough to be a competent horror movie." It's as if the makers of Paint set out to make a biopic about big-haired public television art instructor Bob Ross, but then couldn't get the rights, so they decided to make a different movie about a guy who just looks like Bob Ross. Paint, written and directed by Britt McAdams, best known for his work behind the camera on Comedy Central's Tosh.0, seems to want to make fun of Bob Ross for no discernible reason. The usually charming and effortlessly funny Owen Wilson stars in Paint as Carl Nargle. He's a man very satisfied with his life and appreciative of it too. Carl has everything an enlightened man in the 1970s could want, like his own painting show on Vermont Public TV, adoring fans who paint along with him at home, and laudable hair. He then falls into an ugly but predictable movie-style existential crisis when another younger, better painter comes along, threatens his comfortable existence, and makes him confront some ugly truths. To compete in a crowded marketplace of special effects-laden, intricately plotted, and would-be blockbusters, action and sci-fi filmmakers have to lay out as many new ideas as possible. But 65, written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, the team responsible for the screenplay for A Quiet Place, went simple, assembling recognizable tropes from well-known sci-fi properties. The action begins on the futuristic planet of Somaris. A pilot named Mills volunteers for a 2-year space mission to get the money for the miracle cure for his daughter's illness, but he gets lost in space and crash lands on an unfamiliar planet along with a child named Koa. It's no big surprise to the audience when the planet turns out to be Earth, but it's 65 million years in the past, hence the generic title of the movie. Do the two run for their lives from giant dinosaurs and then also falling space rocks? Of course they do. Unfortunately, the end result isn't any fun, and it doesn't feel particularly inspired.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
You've seen this movie before with different names and different characters. On Rotten Tomatoes, 65 cobbled together a mediocre 35% critical score. Rex Reed of The Observer savaged it, saying, 65 is a gruesome thing to watch, even for dinosaur lovers, and not much fun either. Actors are supposed to be performance chameleons, disappearing into their roles to tell a compelling story. Ghosted stars 2 actors so famous, radiant, and associated with other roles that it's nearly impossible to believe them in this romance action comedy that cribs from so many other movies. Chris Evans, best known for his multiple outings as Captain America, unconvincingly plays a regular guy named Cole. He goes on a date with a mysterious and captivating woman named Sadie, who's so secretive that it's off-putting. It's almost as if she's a spy. She is a spy, of course, and as their young relationship develops, they fall into the midst of a dangerous international caper. Sadie sternly and violently fights the couple's way out of trouble while Cole can't believe the craziness around him, even after wild things keep happening every 5 minutes. As a result, Ghosted is essentially a greatest hits collection of familiar action movie tropes. With a 26% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, Ghosted is a frothy frivolity that didn't leave a good impression on critics. Winlay Ma wrote on Australia's News.com, "This was the leftover scraps cobbled together from better scripts." Clarice Lowry of The Independent accused Ghosted of trying to brainwash its audience on account of the lack of spark between the leads. Love Again is a movie out of its time, an earnest but ultimately dull and dated throwback to 90s romantic comedy movies, but it's got a little something extra in the form of grief and sadness, which the film can't quite ever overcome. That makes for a tonally weird movie, flitting from Priyanka Chopra Jonas's Myra mourning the death of her fiancé to Myra going on a wacky date with a doofus played by Chopra Jonas's husband Nick Jonas, a prolonged wink to the presumably in-the-know audience. The plot kicks off with a heartbreaker of an inciting incident. Myra sends lovey-dovey text messages to her deceased fiancé's old phone number, unaware it's been given to Rob, a journalist who just so happens to be an attractive man roughly Myra's age. At the moment, he's spending an inordinately long time profiling Celine Dion, presented as a contemporary megastar. As you might guess, based on that bit of info, Love Again leans hard into the 90s vibes. Celine believes in love, and so she plays Cupid for Rob and Myra.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
A 24% score makes Love Again a Rotten Tomatoes dud, with critics decidedly not charmed by the movie. David Ehrlich of IndieWire bemoaned, "Most of the laugh lines in Love Again are stale enough that even just hearing them kind of hurts your teeth." At least 2 critics had pretty much the same complaint, with Mara Eakin of the Chicago Reader saying she didn't enjoy the movie's Hallmark-level plot, and Rex Reed of The Observer negatively comparing the whole thing to a Hallmark card.